Okay, thank you.
Okay, Chair, we're now live.
Oh, good evening and welcome to this Virtual Development Control Committee, and welcome to those members of the public watching on the Council's YouTube channel. Mobile phones, just to remind you, those in the meeting, please to keep your phone either switched off or on silent, please, for the duration of the meeting. This meeting is being broadcast live on the Council's YouTube channel. A copy of the recording will be available on the channel shortly after the meeting. Members and officers are reminded to keep their microphones on mute unless they are called to speak. Members can indicate that they wish to speak using the meeting chat function. Please don't use the chat function to ask questions of either officers or councillors because they will not be answered. Just type your name in whatever format you like. In my case, I would just type Malcolm and that's it. That's fine. Thank you. Quasi-judicial. Members of the public are reminded that the planning application process is constrained by the need to have regard of current planning policy at national, regional and local levels, as well as all other material planning considerations, including case law precedent. The decision-making process is often described as quasi-judicial because local planning authorities have to act reasonably within the bounds of planning law and the above considerations, and are not free to determine planning applications simply because of the weight of public opinion. Who's who here this evening? The elected councillors who are present remotely this evening are the members of this committee and will decide what action this committee takes on the issues it considers. We also have a number of officers present whose cameras are mostly switched off and are here to advise the committee on the issues before it. I'm now going to go through, introduce each of the members of the committee, the councillors that sit on this committee. And I'll do that in alphabetical order. So I'll start with, you can just say good evening, hi, or whatever. Councillor Roy Aurora.
Good evening, Chair.
Good evening. Councillor Kim Bailey, who's Vice Chair.
Good evening, Chair.
Good evening. Councillor Mark Banyan.
Good evening, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor David Cunningham.
Good evening, Chair.
Good evening, David. Councillor Lorraine Dunstone.
Good evening, Chair.
Good evening. Councillor Simon Edwards.
Good evening.
Councillor Leslie Heap.
Good evening, Chair.
Councillor Dave Ryder Mills.
Good evening, Chair.
Councillor Rebecca Mole.
Good evening, Chair.
And I fall last alphabetically. I'm Malcolm South and I chair the committee. Thank you. We've also got a number of officers present. We've got Sam.
I'm here as well.
I do apologise. It was missed off my list here. I am very aware that you're a member of this committee, Steph, and welcome. So we've also got, as a member of the committee, Councillor Steph Archer. Good evening, Steph. Thank you for pointing that out.
Good evening, everybody.
Hopefully, we've now got 11 members that I've been through and everybody's been able to speak. Officers, we've got a number of officers present. We've got Sam Nichols, who supports us from Democratic Services, and will be taking the minutes and make sure we follow the correct protocol. We've got Barry Lomax, who's Head of Development Management, and Tim Naylor, who's Assistant Director for Planning. We've got a number of other officers present from IT. They're here in case we have IT issues. Hopefully we won't. That takes us to apologies for absence and attendance of substitute members. We've just been through the list, so we know that everybody is present. So Sam, I think I would call for you for apologies, but we know that everybody's present. Sam, is that okay?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. Taking us on to minutes of previous meetings. We held 3 meetings in July, on the 1st, 9th and 28th of July, and the minutes for each of those meetings were not written up in time to take to the relevant following meeting. So we've got 3 sets of minutes to approve for the 1st, 9th and 28th. They've been circulated to members by email, and they're of course available for anybody to see via the council website. I'm going to pause a moment for members to indicate in the chat function if you do not want to, or think there's anything needs amending on the minutes. Are we all happy to approve all those 3 sets of minutes? And I'll wait a moment to see if any names appear in the chat function. And nothing has appeared. So Sam, we're taking that as read that the minutes for those 3 meetings have been approved as true and correct. Declarations of interest. Members are asked to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests and any other non-pecuniary interests, i.e. personal interests, relevant to items on this agenda. If you've got any interest to declare, if you just type your name in the chat function, and I'll pause a moment to see whether any names pop up. I'm just waiting. Alternatively, since I can see you all in good form, you can just wave your arms. But so there's no declarations of interest. And that takes us then straight into the first of 2 planning items that we've got to consider this evening. The first one, item 1, is the reference number is 19/02677, and it's for 16 to 18 Richmond Road and 2 Canbury Park Road in Kingston, in the centre of Kingston. This is for the demolition of the existing buildings and the erection of a Part 9, Part 8, Part 5-storey mixed-use development fronting Richmond Road, providing it says here an A1/A3 use on the ground floor. I think that will be, in fact, be a Class E use on the ground floor. Barry will no doubt clarify that in his presentation. 15 residential units on the ground and upper floors, erection of a 2-storey replacement building fronting Canbury Park Road to provide ancillary residential facilities at basement, ground and first floors, and provision of associated landscaping, cycle and refuse storage and associated works. I'm now going to turn to our officer, Barry Lomax, who will present the item, and on your screens you should have his presentation come up in front of you. Over to you, Barry. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the first application this evening is at 16 to 18 Richmond Road, and it is for the demolition of the existing buildings on site and for the erection of a mixed-use building with a previously what would have been an A1, A3 use retail cafe on the ground floor, now a Class E use with residential above. Members will see on screen this location plan showing the site outlined in red. The site is of an L-shaped, wrapped around the rear of Whelan's Public House, presenting itself on 2 frontages, one on Richmond Road and the second on Canbury Park Road. Here we see a photograph taken from the sky of the site, indicated with a red arrow, showing the site to the north of the railway line. And then here we see a bird's eye view taken some time ago with the Regal Bingo Centre, Gala Bingo Centre on the left, and the site is indicated by a red arrow. If I take you around the site with some photographs, this shows the Whelan's Public House. The site is either side of the public house. It is, as indicated by Gabrielle's units on the right-hand side, and on the left-hand side, one half of a semi-detached property called The Look. You see here that's his previous name when it operated as a hairdresser's. These are some photographs from inside of the site. If I take you around the top, you see number 1, the rear of number 2 Canbury Park Road. And as we go around number 2, we have another view inside, this time pointing back towards Richmond Road properties. And then we have a view from the railway station, and then 2 other views from within the application site looking towards Canbury Park Road. This is a clearer photograph. This is showing the rear of 16 to 18 looking towards the railway station. And this is a site looking towards a building which is being constructed in a neighbouring property, as part of the tattoo parlour. So the existing site plan, and then we have some existing elevations going around the site, and then we come to the proposal. So the proposal is for the demolition of the existing building and for its replacement with the erection of a Part 9, 8 and 5-storey mixed-use development fronting Richmond Road. Also included is the erection of a 2-storey replacement building, which would be connected to number 4 Canbury Park Road, so as to provide the second half of the semi-detached properties. That would contain ancillary residential accommodation at basement, ground and first floors. And then there's a retail cafe unit proposed on the ground floor fronting Richmond Road. This would now be a Class E, although if minded to approve members might want to restrict it to a cafe retail use. There would be 15 residential units, of which 4 would be studios, 6 would be 1-bed, 4 would be 2-bed, and there would be a 3-bed unit. The application proposes the provision of a single affordable unit, which would be a shared ownership unit, a 1-bedroom, 2-person unit. And the application proposes cycle parking for 25 spaces, 24 within a dedicated store and 1 within a dedicated space within the courtyard of unit number 1. The property would be served by air source heat pumps and by photovoltaic cells. If I now take you through the plans in slightly more detail, this shows the proposed site plan. And then if we start from the basement of the property on Canbury Park Road, this would be ancillary accommodation which would house some of the servicing, the mechanical and electrical equipment. Moving up to the ground floor, residential access would be provided from Canbury Park Road through an entrance where you would meet the refuse store, an entrance to the refuse store, and then around into the residential property with a studio unit on the ground floor with a terrace, some communal space, and then the cycle storage would be in that building fronting Richmond Road. The access to the retail space or the retail unit, the A1, A2 / Class E3 E unit, would come from Richmond Road. Moving through the plans, now looking at the first floor, the proposed building fronting onto Canbury Park Road would operate at first floor as a communal workspace, a work from home centre / garden communal space. This would then open out onto that courtyard via a stairway. Then at the first floor, you have some residential accommodation. Moving up on the second floor, with residential accommodation coming through the floors, and then stepping back when you get to the 5th floor, 6th, 7th, and then at the 8th floor, you have a further step back and you have a terrace space for the uppermost flat. We have a proposed roof plan. All of the flat roofs are proposed to be green or brown roofs as part of the drainage or the surface water drainage strategy. A proposed section through the site showing this is taken from the railway line cutting through the site. You see on the right hand side the property number 2 Canbury Park Road, which would at the first floor be that communal space, at the ground floor refuse with access to the side. This is the proposed west elevation, the elevation which would front Richmond Road. The proposed building at its height, at its maximum, would be 28.4 metres and it'd be 10 metres wide. Looking at the proposed elevation to the rear, this plan indicates in red the scheme as it was originally submitted. Unfortunately, this plan isn't very clear, but other plans will become clearer. And then the blue indicates the scheme which has consent on site granted as appeal. This is taken from the north elevation looking back. You see again the maximum height around 28, dropping down to 25 and then down again to 19 metres with a depth of 21 metres. Here we have the southern elevation, and then this is the elevation of the Canbury Park Road entrance, which would be access, which would facilitate access to the residential properties. And then this is an image taken from the courtyard, looking back towards the access point of Canbury Park Road. On screen now, you see the indicative sight lines looking from the Studio Balconies and looking down to neighbouring properties, showing that there would be limited intervisibility, and especially as we would see from the plans, that most, if not all, of the windows on the rear elevation are obscurely glazed. Visibility from this site is generally to the south and to the west across Richmond Road. What you see now on site, or on screen rather, is a photo montage of the proposed scheme outlined in grey in the centre of the image. And this is a photo montage taken from the rear gardens of Canbury Park Road. This is the image that would present itself if the scheme were to be permitted. The blue line indicates the approximate height of the previously approved scheme. If I now take you around some of the photo montages, this shows the scheme. The windows on this elevation are proposed to be opaque and to be non-openable. That is to ensure, in line with the agent of change principle, that the residential units wouldn't conflict with the public house use on the corner. And then on the front entrance, owing to air quality issues, the ground, the first, second and third floors would be non-openable on this side and reserved by mechanical ventilation, with windows on the southern side being openable. Here we see another image taken further down Richmond Road, and again stepping back further. And then as we move around, this is an image taken from Fife Road back towards the site, taken slightly further back in Fife Road. And then this is an image again taken from further along Richmond Road, outside of the barber shop. And this image on screen now places the approved scheme at the Gala Bingo site next to the proposed scheme at the application site. And again, from slightly closer proximity. This is a photo montage or CGI of the proposed scheme taken further down Canbury Park Road. And then this is the scheme taken from a view over the bus depot at Cromwell Road. And again. This here shows some distances from boundaries. So 8 metres from the boundary that number 4 shares with number 6, and 10 metres from the boundary with number 6. What we have on screen now is a street scene image showing in red the previously approved scheme, in blue a previous scheme submitted on this site pre-application, and then the yellow indicating the scheme that we have in front of us. You'll note that in terms of heights along the street scene, it is comparable to the proposal at the Gala Bingo site, or the permitted scheme at the Gala Bingo site, and Quebec House. On site, or on screen rather, is the scheme which was permitted by the inspectorate back some time ago. The applicants have discharged their conditions with regards to that scheme. What they haven't done is demonstrated that they've commenced the scheme, and in the absence of any compelling evidence, officers aren't certain that the scheme has been commenced. However, this is a scheme that did gain approval by an inspector at appeal. If I take you now through some of the key considerations and key matters. First is, of course, housing delivery. Members will be aware that the authority is unable to demonstrate a 5-year supply of deliverable housing sites, and as such, the authority, like many other authorities, finds itself in a tilted balance scenario. Now, the tilted balance scenario means that unless there are sufficient policies in the National Planning Policy Framework which indicate the scheme should be refused, the proposal should be approved unless the adverse impacts of doing so significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. So the application would deliver 15 units, which is a net increase of 13. It is acknowledged in the report that the proposal only includes 7% 3-bed units, and this is below the 30% policy. However, the viability assessment that's been submitted, also in conjunction with the requirements for affordable homes, demonstrates that to deliver more 3 beds would render the scheme unviable. The viability assessment also assesses the affordable housing position and demonstrates that whilst the scheme at a profit level of around 17.5% would not be able to deliver affordable homes, the developer is proposing one affordable unit, and as a result is witnessing a reduction in profit levels. The proposal would have those 25 cycle spaces and is in an area of excellent public transport. The proposal would be car free, and that would be controlled by a legal agreement, and a legal agreement would also control access to membership of a car club. Turning now to a key consideration of heritage assets. Key heritage assets around the site, and this is indicated in the agenda papers, are clearly the Gala Bingo and then the Sopworth factory along Canbury Park Road, and also the Sopworth factory and Siddle's building on Canbury Park Road. Officers consider that the building most impacted on by this development would be the Gala Bingo. However, given the significance of that asset being a complete example of a cinema of its time, with most of the architectural features of significance being internal, we conclude that there would not be a harmful impact on Gala Bingo, and as such, officers consider that the tilted balance remains engaged. Turning now to the issues of air quality and noise, members will see from the late update material that there has been a change in position with regards to air quality owing to the submission of a revised report. Initially, there was concerns about air quality from the ground to the 5th floor on Richmond Road. However, a revised report with more realistic assumptions has been agreed with the environmental health team, and they consider that there are still problems, but those problems would be from ground to 3rd, and that those units on Richmond Road or fronting Richmond Road will have sealed units for windows and would be served by mechanical ventilation. However, they would have access to openable windows along the southern elevation. Now, it is acknowledged that the southern elevation would open out onto the railway line, and therefore, as identified in our report, we do identify that the residential quality of these units is compromised when compared to a unit which is not next to a railway line. However, following discussions with the environmental health team, both acoustic and air quality, their advice is that the standard of accommodation would still meet the relevant levels. Turning to daylight and sunlight impacts on neighbouring properties. Now, there will, of course, be an impact on daylight and sunlight. This is a building of 9 stories, and there will be an impact on the gardens and properties on Canbury Park Road. However, those properties and the gardens attached thereto have been assessed in line with the British Research Establishment guidelines, and the results are that the windows and the properties all pass the required levels. There is one window in number 6 Canbury Park Road which serves a galley kitchen. Now, galley kitchens, as set out within the report, aren't treated as habitable accommodation, and there would be a significant impact on that galley kitchen, but it would still receive adequate levels of daylight for the type of room which the window serves. Mr. Chairman, that is everything I have. The update paper contains additional information on air quality. It covers off a typo error with regards to cycle parking, and some of the conditions have been amended to reflect some changes in how they've been worded. So the recommendation is as set out on screen, and that is to grant permission subject to the legal agreement and the conditions set out in the report and as part of the late material. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Barry, for that comprehensive description of the application. We do have registered to speak this evening both an objector and the applicants. We've got Warren Samuels registered to speak as an objector, and we've got Mark Thompson and Jenny Fitzgerald registered to speak on behalf of the applicants. So I'm going to turn to Warren first. You've got, I think you should know, Warren, you've got 5 minutes to speak. That's it. No discretion on my part to allow you any longer than 5 minutes. But we'll give you a reminder after 4 minutes, i.e. when you've got 1 minute left, that when that time comes, that you've got 1 minute left to wrap up on. So it's over to you, Warren. The floor is yours for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Right. We live directly next door to the proposed development, and the excessive height will impact on our lives and well-being in every way. I'd like to say that, as Barry just said, that daylight would only be affected a little bit to our house, but we were told this when the 5-story structure was granted, 7, 8 years ago. So how something twice the height but still only affecting us a little bit, it doesn't make any sense. But the developers seem to be basing their plans on the apartment complex opposite, which has no low-level housing in its vicinity, and they're ignoring the fact that the proposed building is at the end of a row of small Victorian cottages. There are no buildings of such stature in the local vicinity. The largest is the Gala Bingo Hall, which is only 4 to 5 stories against this proposed 9 stories. I know they're going to add, or they propose to add, some on top of the bingo hall, but that is going to be staggered back, so it will be nowhere near the height of this new development. This new development will dwarf every other structure locally and will be completely out of place with all the other buildings in the surrounding area. In the 26 years we have lived here, we've seen many large developments get passed through for development, and each time the councillors assured us that they will not give us any loss of light. Sadly, this has not been the case, but this new development will be the final straw. It will be akin to living in a pit. Not only will we be in darkness, but our privacy will be greatly affected. I have read all the documents attached to this new development, and I feel they are being very economical with the truth. They've provided a flood report which claims that the development area is not prone to flooding. In the last week, the area immediately adjacent to the proposed build, the railway underpass, has been flooded so badly that the road has been closed on 2 occasions. But according to the flood report they've provided, this can't actually happen. This puts into question the validity of their research. Our house and our neighbours, and possibly more, have been affected by subsidence in the past due to the quality of the soil and the age of our properties and the Victorian drainage system in place, and I fear that a structure of this size will only cause more damage to our foundations. I also worry about how the development will be built. There is no direct access for heavy machinery, and Canbury Park Road, which is already substantially overparked by shoppers for the town centre, cannot afford to lose any parking bays or the loading bay. I fear this will cause major disruption to the road network, both in our road and in Richmond Road, which is already highly congested. We have been residents of Kingston upon Thames for many years and have seen it change considerably over this time, but have never seen a structure of this size in a residential area before. And I think if this goes ahead, will set a dangerous precedent for construction in the area. We therefore strongly object to this development, as the footprint for a building of this size is just too small. This will give nothing but misery to the residents of Canbury Park Road and the surrounding residents. I sincerely hope that Kingston Council will listen intently to the complaints of the residents and will not allow this to go any further. I'd also like to speak on behalf of our neighbour who runs Custom Tattoo. These are his words. I am the owner of Custom Tattoo, which is a long-established business of over 30 years in this location. My shop is directly adjacent to proposed development. I've recently spent over £55,000 on refurbishment and the erection of an annex building to ensure a calm and professional environment for both customers and artists. I am objecting to this proposed development because the building work required for a structure of this size will be very disruptive to my business. Part of the proposed development is physically attached directly to my building. Tattoo work requires precision and a calm atmosphere.
1 minute.
Substantial building works will eradicate this and result in loss of income. With a 15-year lease on the property and £22,000 rent a year to cover, any such disruption could potentially bankrupt my business. With the only access to the proposed development being via the shop annexed to my premises, the likely and possible permanent suspension of parking outside to allow access for the development is going to be also detrimental to my business. That's it, I'm done.
Thank you very much, Warren. You kept within your 5 minutes. Thank you. If you can stay in the meeting, because after the applicants have spoken, members may wish to ask questions of you.
Okay.
So just stay with us for the time being. Welcome. We've got Mark Thompson and Jenny Fitzgerald. So welcome, Mark and Jenny. And Jenny, I'm sure you're aware you've got 5 minutes, and we'll let you know when you've got 1 minute left. So it's over to you, Mark and Jenny. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. I'd firstly like to thank the planning officers for their professional and well-considered report. We hope that members will agree with the recommendation and grant planning permission. As set out in the Council's report, the redevelopment of the site will deliver much-needed housing as well as retail accommodation on a highly sustainable brownfield site in Kingston town centre adjacent to the station. The stepped height design from 9 to 5 stories on Richmond Road and 2 stories on Canterbury Park Road responds to the site's unique gateway location and context, including the height of the Regal building and other buildings in the station environment. The height and massing has been reduced from 12 stories to 9, with 8 and 5-storey parts, through working with the Council's planning and urban design officers over the last year or so, and following consultation with wider stakeholders. Kingston Town Centre is an identified opportunity area for development, and opportunities in this area should be supported and embraced to strengthen the local economy of Kingston Town Centre and deliver new homes, whilst also reducing the pressure of development in more suburban areas of Kingston. In particular, in light of COVID-19, there is a need to attract and encourage town centre living to support the office and retail markets in these centres. This application will directly contribute towards reinvigorating the town centre. The development will deliver 15 residential units. Despite the independent financial review finding it is not viable to do so, in terms of delivering affordable housing, the applicant recognises the importance and value of affordability and has offered one on-site affordable unit, and is also committed to ensuring all units are available through the government's Help to Buy scheme. Since the council cannot identify a 5-year housing land supply, the provision of sustainable housing should be supported and given significant weight in the decision, particularly as there are no adverse impacts to outweigh the benefits. The scheme delivers high-quality dual-aspect homes meeting or exceeding London Plan standards. Extensive work considering environmental aspects have been undertaken to ensure development is of a high quality and the homes are of a high quality. All homes have private amenity space as well as a co-working winter garden and landscape courtyard for communal amenity. All homes will benefit from safe and secure cycle parking and car club membership for 3 years. The application delivers a Section 106 financial contribution towards local play space improvement and still contributions of over 300,000 towards local infrastructure. Revisions through the application, such as reducing massing, reorientating aspect, as well as privacy screens and obscure glazing, maintain good quality accommodation whilst achieving an acceptable relationship with neighbouring properties. As considered by the Council's officers, given the degree of separation and the town centre location, it is not considered that the development would have any unacceptable impact on neighbouring properties. Furthermore, the development complies fully with the BRE guidelines in respect of daylight, sunlight and overshadowing. The proposals have always also embraced urban greening and sustainability through planting in areas of green walls and roofs, achieving a 65% reduction in carbon emissions. Before handing over to the scheme architect, I would like to conclude that the development proposed should be considered to be acceptable as it is compliant with local and national planning policy in all respects and follows extensive consultation and engagement. None of the Council's internal consultees have raised objections to the proposals, which clearly demonstrates the application's compliance with relevant policies and guidance. The provision of new homes, jobs and investment into Kingston Town Centre should be supported. Jenny.
Thank you, Mark, and good evening, everyone. The architectural design for the scheme is inspired by Kingston's industrial heritage and local buildings of merit, such as the Regal building and the Sopwith aviation buildings. The palette of materials and use of red brickwork with rich detailing achieves an understated, elegant design which is rooted in its context. The proposals have been designed and informed by extensive engagement with the Council's officers, the South East Design Review Panel, as well as local stakeholders. In particular, the independent DRP were supportive of the height, scale and appearance of the scheme. The height of the scheme responds to the site's adjacent buildings, including the Regal building and those to the south around the station.
1 minute.
It acknowledges the gateway town centre location whilst respecting the scale and relationship of surrounding properties. The small site footprint and stepped form defines different elements of the building, creating slender, elegant proportions. Whilst 9 stories at its tallest on Richmond Road, this is only a small part, with most of the proposed form being 8 or 5 stories. This is a result of revisions through the course of the application to ensure the development better integrated into a setting and context. The highest part of the building has been reduced from 12 stories when we first met with your officers to 9 stories today, which is in line with the North Kingston development brief. The scheme does not affect or impact any protected views or vistas in the borough. We strongly believe the development will make a positive contribution to the approach into Kingston Town Centre through its carefully stepped form and contextual use of materials and detailing. We agree with the Council's assessment, which aligns with the DRP's advice that when it comes to height, massing and presence along Richmond Road and Canbury Park Road, the scheme is considered to be a reasonable, well-articulated and positive addition to the wider Kingston townscape.
Thank you very much, both of you. And I think you kept your 5 minutes, so well done. Thank you very much. Please stay in the meeting just for the time being. Members, do you have any questions for the objective to Warren, please? If you do, could you please just type your name in the chat function, and I'll pause a moment to see if any names come up. There's no names appearing. If you've got any questions, you can also, obviously I can see you in good form in front of me. There's no questions for the objector. Thank you. Do any members have questions for the applicants? If you can write just type your name in the chat function. Again, it appears that there's no questions for applicants either. I'm getting Lorraine, I think, has got a question. Is that correct? Over to you, Lorraine. Sorry, I've got Lorraine. Sorry, I'm looking in the wrong place. I've got Lorraine and then Simon. And we'll start the 5 minutes for questions from now. In fact, we've got Lorraine, Simon, and then Steph. Over to you, Lorraine. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for those presentations. I just wanted clarity, really, on how people get to the residential part of the property. Is it only through the community, the amenity space, and then up the steps? Thank you.
Straight over to you, either of you applicants. Yeah, thanks.
I'll answer that one. Yeah, it's through the Canbury Park Road amenity space and then round to the back of the main building.
And then up the steps to the first floor?
It's steps or lift.
Oh, there is a lift. Okay, that's not clear. That's not clear on the plan. So thank you for that clarity.
Oh, yes, there's a lift in there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I've got Simon, over to you, Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. It's just about the north elevation, really. That's been through quite a few changes in the course of the application, and so I'm left a little bit confused as to exactly what's proposed here. On the 9-story part, on the visuals that we've given on the plans, it seems that the top 2 duplex stories have what's termed opaque glass rather than obscured glass, and by that I take it to mean opaque means it gets virtually no light through it at all. And below that, as I understand it, on 7, 6, 5 and 4, there are metal features which look like windows but are not. And then on the second block, which is it 7 stories? I can't remember now. That's all brick. And on the third bit, that will be, is that obscured glass or just plain glass? I don't quite know. So I want that clarified, please. And also, can you explain why it is that this north face is, what's your reason for having this north face without functioning windows?
Right. Thank you, Simon. We've got the question straight to you, Mark and Jenny. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, the result of the changes to the north elevation was really about marrying the different competing contexts, in that we have the relationship with the pub building and a potential development site, and not being able to have actual clear glass on that facade, but at the same time wanting to make it interesting. So similarly to the rest of the building, we have 3 different conditions. So on the taller element, as you pointed out, we have some opaque glazing and some metal, which reflects the facade on the other side, albeit it's not clear glass. for the relationship, as I spoke about. But we do have some glazing where we have the stair core, which separates the elements as it does on the other side of the building. And then also a combination of some brick detailing, which so it does pick up the other elements of the scheme, but does so in a way that manages those constraints with that boundary relationship with the pub.
Okay, I think we've got 2 other questions. We might have to defer to Officer Simon. I'm going to go to Steph and then Leslie, and then we'll see how the time on our questions goes. So over to you, Steph, for your question, please.
Yeah, so mine was again a question about the windows. Are there going to be rooms in these dwellings then that don't have any natural light coming in at all? I know you mentioned the galley kitchen. Is that the only rooms in the building that will have no natural light, or will there be other ones? Also concerned about the lack, interested about this mechanical ventilation, whether how will that work? Will it be like air conditioning? Can you explain a bit more about that, please?
We've only got 1 minute left. Mark and Jenny, straight to you about the windows and how would the mechanical ventilation work?
So there will be light all of the way around. That north elevation is actually a third facade, if you like, of that apartment. So it actually gets dual aspect all the way around. That's just the third elevation. So that was more really for about the appearance from the street as opposed to the daylight of the flat itself, which receives plenty of daylight. And the mechanical ventilation will be for the lower units only, and it will take air from outside and extract it out again with a filtration system. But they will also be openable windows on the southern side of that unit. So it will just be on the Richmond Road facade, but that will be the case.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And Leslie, if you're quick, you might get in. Thank you. You're on
5 minutes.
Our 5 minutes for questions is up. I'm sorry, Leslie. So that's our 5 minutes for questions of the applicant. So thank you, Warren, Mark and Jenny. That concludes our public participation. You can now leave the meeting and follow the rest of the proceedings on the council's YouTube stream. So, but thank you very much for attending. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Warren. I'm going to turn to back to Barry. If you've got any sweep up comments following the presentations and questions of the applicant there. Over to you, Barry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of points which were raised by the objector. The flooding report identifies that there's no risk of river flooding in this area. It is in flood zone 1, but as set out in the report, it is identified that there is surface water flooding on Richmond Road, and the proposal has gone through detailed discussions with the council's lead local flood authority, the council's flood officer, and a sustainable drainage system being the green-brown roofs. The officer concludes that it wouldn't exacerbate drainage problems in terms of surface water on Richmond Road, and Thames Water have commented that the proposal can be adequately accommodated within the drainage infrastructure. With regards to the windows, just to clarify, and I suspect it's my fault not being clear in the presentation, all of the units would have access to natural light, but some of the windows would be fixed closed. And they'll be fixed closed for either reasons of noise when you get close to Whelan's, or air quality when you get to ground, first, second, third floor on Richmond Road elevation. But all units would have an aspect with openable windows, and as you get up through the building, the 4th, 5th, 6th floor would have windows openable on Richmond Road and on the southern elevation. With regards to that northern elevation, there was a key concern raised by officers during the process that what we wouldn't want to do is sterilise the potential of that site to be redeveloped at some point in the future. Now, that's not something we have in front of us now, but we're mindful that if windows were to be placed in that elevation, that would impact significantly on the developability of the site on the corner. Now, it might be that that site never comes forward for redevelopment, but we thought it prudent not to sterilise and still ensure that adequate levels of lighting, the average daylight factor in each of the rooms proposed would meet the standards. But then we were concerned that we didn't want to leave a blank facade. Hence, you see some recesses and some opaque glazing at higher levels to give an impression of some relief, or to give actual relief on that elevation. I think they're the main points that I wanted to come back to. Just very quickly on the point about the lift. The lift does go to all floors, and all units are designed to be, or 90% M42 and 10% M43. So all wheelchair compliant in line with the building regulations and planning policy. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Barry. So questions from the committee to Barry or to our planning officer. Do we have any questions? Leslie had a question to the applicant. I don't know whether you wanted to go first, Leslie. If you could transfer your question to Barry. And whilst Leslie's asking that, if anybody else has got questions for Barry, then could you type your name in the chat function, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. While we're just talking about, I think Barry might have answered the question, I'm not sure. Are there any units that have a single aspect, or do all units, including the studios, have light from different sides, dual aspect? That's one question. And then another quick question, how wide is the entrance that people gain access to the property at Canbury Park Road? Because they have to go past the refuse bins and to get presumably to the bike stores. How wide is that entrance physically? It looks quite narrow from the plan, but it may not be. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Barry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the first point about single aspect, there is only one single aspect unit, and that is the studio flat on the ground floor to the rear of the retail. Sorry, I'm going to keep on calling it retail. To the proposed Class E retail A3, A1 unit at the front of Richmond Road, there is a studio unit at the back. That is a single aspect, although it does pass the requirements in terms of daylight. With regards to access along the Courtyard scheme from Canbury Park Road, whilst it appears narrow, I don't have the exact measurements, but it is comparable or wider than actually a normal entrance to a property, to a house. So it's wide enough for wheelchair, buggy, cycles. It is, if I share my screen again, you'll see in slightly more detail. Sorry, this is going to take. Are you? This should pop up any second.
It's coming up. Yeah.
Now. So that entrance there is the entrance to the residential. Now, of course, there's two reasons why officers have looked at working on this site with our highway colleagues. We were conscious we didn't want a busy access off Richmond Road because it's a narrow pavement and it's a relatively well-trafficked pavement. So residential access brought round to this corner, and this access point, as I say, is comparable with a general residential access point one might find in a residential unit. It is wide enough for wheelchairs, bicycles, push chairs, and any other type of things you would like to get through there. I'm trying to think of anything else other than those three, but any other that fits in that list will be able to get through that entrance point. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Barry. I've got in the list of questions, I've got Simon, then Kim, and then Dave. So over to you, Simon.
Thank you, Chair. In fact, Barry's answered one of the question I was going to ask about the windows, but I want to go back to them in the north elevation, please. I can see how the treatment differs between the highest of the three blocks and the middle one. And in terms of design, well, it's obviously the middle one is better than just a blank brick wall, but it does look to me anyway rather odd, reminiscent, as someone has remarked, of the time when windows were taxed. many years ago, many centuries ago. And I just wondered whether there was some way in which we could influence that design so that if we approved, there would be a treatment which is more like that on the taller of the blocks, the tallest block, than the one in the middle, which is pure brick, and to me looks quite incongruous. That's the question.
I think that's a question. Barry, over to you, Barry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I see what you're saying. The daylight robbery, the tax that took the windows away in the villas. Members, if minded to approve, could indeed expand on one of the conditions that requires the architectural detailing of some of these features to be submitted and approved, and that condition could require specifically how that north elevation treatment is designed. Members might recall, or it might have been just before the election, we dealt with a scheme in Kingston Town Centre, Gough House, which presented an elevation similar to this as you drive down Eden Street. And we've had the same problem, and we've imposed a condition there requiring detailed brickwork to add that relief. So certainly, if members were minded, a condition on the architectural detailing could be amended to address the concerns of Councillor Edwards. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Barry. Next to the list is Kim. Over to you, Councillor Bailey. Thank you.
Hello. Yeah, I was just wondering about if there are any guidelines to do with the footprint of the building. To me, it looks a little bit top heavy. I'm used to seeing buildings of that height with perhaps a bit of area around them, and this is sort of really quite close to the adjacent buildings. I presume that's been looked at. I couldn't find anything about it, but just wonder if you could comment on that.
Thank you, Kim. I think that's. I take your point. I think you're verging onto a comment. But Barry, is there any planning policy or guidelines relating to that? We'll just stick to the question at the moment.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
There's no set guidelines in the amount of floor coverage or footprint that you would take up on a site, as long as the resulting development is acceptable in and of itself in design terms. There is relief here in terms of that communal garden to the rear, although it is a limited size, about 25 square metres, I think it is. But what one might want to do in other schemes is to compensate for a large footprint by using the roofs as outdoor terracing. Now here, of course, that's not something that could be explored because of potential overlooking into those rear gardens of Canby Park Road. So in short, no, it's not unusual, or there's no guidelines restricting how much footprint you take, as long as you design things, for example, surface water drainage features into a scheme. But we might have looked at roof gardens, but of course this is restricted because of it being in close proximity to residential properties. But in short, no absolute restrictions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Barry. We've got 4 councillors requesting still to ask questions, which is Councillor Dave Ryder-Mills, and then Roy, and then Lorraine, and then Councillor David Cunningham. And then hopefully we'll draw a close to questions, and we'll move on to our debate. So over to you. This is just for a question to Dave. Thank you.
2 quick questions, please, Barry. Firstly, I'm still worried about this ventilation business. So dual question in a way. What factors were taken into account or were taken further into account when the decision was made that it's only the first 3 stories rather than the first 5 stories that should have sealed windows? And secondly, what does that actually do to the potential COVID safety of those properties? We're constantly being warned nowadays to avoid still spaces and musty spaces. How does this tally with having the mechanical ventilation, presumably another word for air conditioning, which will will it mix air with between flats or what? I don't quite understand. Second question is just one that came up when you showed one of the earlier slides in your presentation, which is a little sort of square within the pub and between the pub and the building. Now, during the 2009 application, I actually went to have a pint in the pub just to see what it would look like from there. And there was actually a little garden in the pub. Does that still exist? Because with this application, it will be completely surrounded and very closely surrounded. And I would have thought become unbearable to use. But does it still exist? Do we know?
Thank you very much, Dave. And I think your first question is particularly pertinent, I think. I know that there's different kinds of ventilation systems available, from those that do not recirculate any air at all to those that recirculate a large proportion of the air, and that I would have thought would inevitably give rise to coronavirus concerns. But Barry, do we know the answers to those questions? Over to you, Barry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The coronavirus and impact thereof was slightly beyond my professional competencies. However, that's never stopped me before trying to answer a question. So certainly the details of the mechanical ventilation would be controlled by condition, or could be controlled by condition, to ensure that there would be adequate filtration to clean air. The purpose of the mechanical ventilation is to take air from the top of the building where it's not impacted by pollutants from the roads, and then brings it down to the property so they have clean air, and then takes air out and takes it out the roof and dumps it out at that level. So it recycles air, takes air from the roof, brings it down, takes it into the property, and then takes air out in the other direction. Now, the idea of closed windows is something that we dealt with at the home base scheme on that rear elevation that faces Lawson's, and indeed is something which is identified in the National Planning Practice Guidance as a solution to this type of problem, having closed windows and mechanical ventilation. So it's not unusual. It is a system of taking fresh air, bring it into a unit, and dirty air or used air is taken out at the roof. But the absolute details of that could be controlled by condition. The reason why there was a change from 5 to 3 was because of a revised air quality report, which has been thoroughly assessed by our friends and colleagues in the environmental health team, who are confident that air quality breaches would only take place at the ground, the first, the second, and the third floor. And when you get to the fourth, there will be some dissipation that would mean that isn't problematic at that level. With regards to Whelan's, the public house, and it sounds awful, I'm going to say I have been in there, but I can't remember whether there's a pub. And not remembering isn't indication of the fun I had in the pub, but I think there might be still a very small, very small courtyard at the back, but I can't quite recall. This would, without a doubt, enclose that space, although that space is already enclosed. My understanding is that there might be a plastic roof or some type of roof covering to it, but I can't swear to that. It's been an awfully long time since I've been to that public house. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Barry. I think that's probably as far as we can go on the ventilation. I'll just, well, maybe I'll bring it in as a comment, but maybe I'll make a comment on the ventilation later. It's not really a question. So to you, Roy, for your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. But I do believe there's a second part of Dave Ryder-Mills, Councillor Dave Ryder-Mills' question, which remains unanswered, unless I'm mistaken. It was to do with the garden in the pub next door.
I think Barry's responded to that. We think that we can't swear on oath about the size of the garden. We think that there's a small, I don't know if garden's the right area, but a small courtyard or whatever to the rear of the pub, but we're not totally sure on that. Is that, I think that's right, isn't it, Barry?
I've just this minute received a message from a colleague who is watching us live, and she indicates that there is a small courtyard to the rear of the public house.
Right. Thank you. That's clarified that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Lomax. My main question, actually, Chair, was actually answered, but I've got a couple of smaller questions, if I may. One is, there's much reference to that this building being as a gateway building. I'd like to ask, is it a gateway building, and how much weight is attached to that point? And secondly, it's a point of clarification. I think I do know the answer to this, but I'd like to, for clarification, know what is a winter garden?
Thank you, Barry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, first, a gateway building. This site is clearly at an entrance point to the town centre. When you get beyond the railway line, you're clearly in Kingston town centre, and as you're coming down Richmond Road, you're moving from an area of predominantly residential into an area of a mixed commercial, mixed height, from a low rise to a medium rise scenario. So officers say that this is an entrance point. That in and of itself doesn't take any extra weight. It just identifies that it is an important location, and therefore we have to be cognizant of the importance of it. Now, with regards to winter gardens, it is it's an outdoor area that has the ability to seal it off. So even though it's a balcony, you would have, so the winter gardens on the first, second, third floor would be sealed. So it would be like a conservatory in effect, as a balcony. It would be sealed. Some of the winter gardens as you move around do have openable glazing, but so your winter garden is, how to describe, like a conservatory at a higher level, as in a glazed structure. So to give you a feeling of an outdoor space where you can grow plants and whatever, but you do have the ability to close it off. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Barry. Councillor Dunstone, over to you, Lorraine, for your question.
Thank you, Chair. I have two questions, if that's all right. One of them following on from Councillor Aurora's question regarding gateway location. I'm still a bit unclear, because does that mean that all buildings as you go into a Kingston Town Centre are gateway buildings? Because that's the way that's just how it came across. That's my first question.
Is that a question that's to me, gateway? I would think it's a gateway to Kingston, because as you're approaching from Richmond, I know that there are some retail units before the bridge. I'm fully aware of that, but the main bit of Kingston Town Centre is as you go under the bridge and into by the rotunda, etc. So I think of it as a gateway building. But
okay, all right,
better answer from that.
Well, I suppose we could interchange the word gateway with prominent, important, welcoming. Well, that's subjective. Prominent building. It is a building that heralds a change from a low-rise residential area as you come to Richmond Road, or down Richmond Road or up Canbury Park Road. You're entering a more commercial, urban, metropolitan town centre that Kingston is. You're entering the heart of the town, and this building heralds that arrival. So not all buildings would be gateway buildings, but there will be buildings around Kingston that are County Hall, the building that the university have just built, its name Townhouse. They would be two gateway buildings into the town centre. So then this would be a counterfoil to that over the other side of Kingston. And then on London Road, you'd see Tiffin and the grammar school being gateway locations into the town centre. But that in and of itself isn't a material consideration we can be asking members to apply weight to. It just identifies the role that this site is playing in the urban fabric of Kingston Town Centre. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I just wanted clarity on that. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. I have one other question, if possible, Chair. And it's regarding the noise considerations. And I wondered if there was any protection, because I understand the pub does have live events. and I was wondering if there was any protection against complaints against the public house, because obviously if you're living right next to it, you know, there could be the potential for complaints, and then that might be detrimental to the public house, which obviously would be helpful. Thank you.
It's very pertinent to this application. So Barry, maybe you'd like to could clarify that, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So certainly the National Planning Policy Framework and the London Plan will tell us that we have to be cognizant of introducing what might be a neighbour which conflicts with an existing or established use, in this case a public house, which makes noise. How that's been addressed is following the guidance in the National Planning Practice Guidance, is to ensure that the windows facing Whelan's are non-openable. So noise won't come through openable windows on that side. And then, of course, you have a shielding from the building, so the windows that look over the south and the windows over Richmond Road would have less of an impact. Overarching all of that, of course, is the Whelan's public house operates in a close proximity to residential units already, existing residential units. So there is a requirement on Whelan's not to produce an unnecessary or an unreasonable amount of noise in any event. Taking that in conjunction with the unopenable windows, our friends in the environmental health team are confident that that issue of unfriendly neighbourliness has been addressed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Barry. And our final question is from David. David.
Fine, thank you. Three questions. First of all, on the density, we see that normally the density in this area would be between 215 and 405 units per hectare, but this development is 551 units per hectare. So even taking it its worst case, that's an increase of some 40%. Now, I do understand that we're not to apply mechanistically the density, but this seems a significantly higher density. And surely we must put some weight on this, because it does seem that is quite, because that's the worst, that's a 40% over the worst case. And also on habitable rooms per hectare, although not as big a percentage, it still represents also a large increase. That's my first point. Second point, disappointed to see carbon offset, because I thought we'd agreed that we would seek to get a sufficient BREEAM such that it would be covered at its highest rate. And considering this is a new build development, I would have thought if you can't get this up to the highest quality, wherever can you get it up to the highest quality? The third point is more a comment, suppose, and that's to do with the noise. I think I'm right in saying that the openable windows are overlooking the railway line. And if that is the case, we've already had this problem where in fact the rail announcements cause considerable concern. And I think we actually took some effort some time back ago in order to do something regarding screening that. Of course, you can't screen it at this sort of height. So it's a comment, but it does seem to me that when you say, well, it's okay because we can open the windows, I think we're talking about the windows that overlook the railway line, and that will be quite an antisocial element to the residents. Those are my 3 points. I would have asked a few more, but some of them have already been covered.
Thank you, David. We're going to go on next to comments, and I think mostly, and I'm not saying I disagree with any of the comments you've made, because I think I agree with all that you've just said, but I'm not sure that they're questions that Barry can directly answer. The density, the CO2 offset, and the noise is covered in the report, but have you got anything to add, Barry?
Only very quickly. Of course, as Councillor Cunningham alluded to, the current London Plan is clear. We should not apply the density matrix mechanistically. We should take into account the access to services and its proximity in relation to public transport accessibility. Now, this is one of the highest levels of public transport accessibility, and has great access to services. The new London Plan, of course, would move away from such a density matrix that we see in the current London Plan, and look for a design-led solution, which this proposal has gone through significant design iterations. It's reduced from a 16 to a 15 unit building, elements of the massing have been taken out. So officers were cognizant of that transgression in terms of the current matrix, but have worked in light with the intent to publish London Plan Policy about how we can have a design-led approach to such a building. Looking at the carbon offset, it's important to note that the policy talks of aiming at 35% above building regulation standard. This scheme achieves a 65% improvement over the standards, and then it's only a very small amount of money, 9,000, is it 9,000? I think 9,966, which would then, that extra money would in effect take it to zero carbon, which is what the levy's for. So this, I agree, it would be better if it was 100%, but we've been working with the developer to see how best we can get it to the highest possible, and that's through air source heat pumps, photovoltaic cells, and hence that number of 10,000 is reasonably low compared to what we've seen elsewhere. With regards to noise from the trains, that is there is going to be noise from the train line and train announcements. Now, our environmental health team have assessed it, and within the unit, levels are okay. Only the first, the second, the third floor have openable windows only on that elevation. But also we're mindful that people moving into these units will be aware of the close proximity to the railway line. And there will be a little bit of them being aware. So this isn't introducing a noise emitter into a residential unit. This will be people moving into a location next to a railway line. I live in close proximity to a railway line, and I can hear noise in the station announcements, but you do get used to it. I don't live as close to the railway line as these people, if the permission is granted, would do. But all these things have been taken into account by an environmental health team. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Barry. I'm now going to, as a matter of procedure, I'm going to move the recommendation on pages A51 to A79 with a recommendation to approve this application. This is a matter of procedure, and in moving that recommendation, I'm not passing any comment as to its merits or otherwise. So I move the recommendation. Do we have a seconder for that, please? Who will no doubt second it also without inferring any view as to the merits or otherwise of this application.
Chair, yes, I'm happy to second it with similar caveats.
Okay, thank you very much. That's Councillor Bailey has seconded that. Thank you. We now move to the discussion, and after the discussion we will go to a vote. So again, if you can indicate in the chat function if you'd like to speak on this. I'm sure we've got speakers. I've got things to say on it, I know. So I'm expecting some names to pop up. None of them have come up yet, but we do have one. So we're going to go straight to Mark Banyan, who's come up first. Whilst Mark is speaking, if you wish to speak in the discussion, please just add your name. Over to you, Mark, to kick things off. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully you can hear me clearly. Yeah, I've just got a few issues. It's really about the kind of, I guess, the design and the impacts on the local area. I kind of feel that this is kind of, it feels like it's kind of a building that's going to be shoehorned into a very small space. Looking at, you talked about the people have talked about the heights and then kind of in comparison to the local area, which is important, obviously. And I don't necessarily have anything against, higher rise buildings, but you take a cross section across the Richmond Road, there are a couple of other higher, buildings of of more than 2 stories, up to about 4.
Apologies, Mr. Chairman, can I interrupt? We seem to have lost Councillor Archer.
Oh, thank you very much. In that case, we will halt proceedings and see. Sam, are you in or can we wait and see whether Councillor Archer can rejoin the meeting?
Chair.
Pardon? Over to Sam. Can you just clarify?
Yeah, I'm just to clarify, Chair. I'm going to contact Councillor Archer now.
Okay, we'll just stay in the meeting for a moment. We won't adjourn the meeting or just for a moment, but we'll just see if we can get Steph back with us. Thank you. And then when we get back, Mark, if you can start your question. Oh, sorry, I do.
I will, yeah, that was the Chair. Thank you.
You start your comments right from this afresh, as if you hadn't said anything yet, as it were. Yeah?
I'll rewind. Yes, thank you, Chair.
Rewind. Yeah, thank you. just for members watching on the YouTube channel, or residents watching on the YouTube channel, the reason we need to wait is that it is necessary for members to be present throughout the whole meeting to be able to vote. So if a member drops out briefly, we will pause the meeting to allow them to rejoin, and then they can still vote on it.
Hi, Chair. Just to confirm, I've given Councillor Archer details to join by phone because she's having internet connection problems.
Right. So hopefully she'll be back with us very shortly.
Yeah.
Welcome back, Steph. Could you just say good evening or hello, just to confirm that you're back with us? Thank you.
Councillor Archer, if you press star and then 6, it unmutes you.
Hello, it's Councillor Archer here. I'm sorry about that. I am safely on the phone.
That's good. It's good to have you back on by phone. Thank you very much and welcome back. We can hear you loud and clear. I think when you dropped out of the meeting, we'd already moved the recommendation, and I'd moved it, and Kim had seconded it, and Councillor Banyan had just started to speak make his comments, but he's going to rewind and start as if he hadn't said anything. So over to you, Mark. We can now continue.
Well, I forgot what to say now. No, I'm only joking. I will start from the beginning. My main issue with the development, I guess, is just about design, about the effects on the local area. I'm not necessarily against higher rise developments. I just feel like it's being kind of squeezed into a very small footprint, which is just going to kind of accentuate the height and the contrast with the buildings around it. If you look at, people have talked about the buildings around it, and if you look along the Richmond Road, there's a development next door, obviously the Gala Bingo Hall, and across the other side of the bridge you got the student flats, but I think this is going to be even higher than those. It's going to be a very small footprint. It's going to look even which will accentuate the height, as I say. And if you look along the Canbury Park Road, then you've got a whole row of terraced houses. and this is going to be wrapping around the pub that's already there. Look, I just feel it will kind of look very out of place. We talk about the kind of talk about buildings fitting in with the immediate environment. If you look at the very immediate vicinity of this building, it is around the kind of the terrace houses. You got the pub, you got a couple of commercial buildings, houses next door, really, and it just I just think it will look very much out of place, and that kind of concerns me. I think it's an area that could do with some development and could, it is an area that probably looks a little bit messy, and it could be improved, but I don't think this is going to help in any way. And I think this will just kind of add to the kind of messiness of the area, really. I don't think it really fits in with what's there already. I'm concerned with that, with how that would, kind of impact the local area. And if we talk about it being kind of a gateway, and I think it's important. It is a gateway. It's where people are driving in for this very busy road, and I don't see that this is the kind of impression you want to give in the way coming into the centre of Kingston, where you've got this kind of very narrow kind of tall building in amongst the kind of the terraced houses. I feel it's potentially also, and all the other point is there is a lack of kind of affordable housing. I know it's very important we improve where we increase the number of we need more houses, and particularly we need more affordable housing. And then there's a lack of kind of affordable housing in the being provided. It's shared ownership, which is, I guess, the least affordable of the kind of affordable types of housing available. So I guess I do have concerns about development and how it kind of will fit in with the immediate vicinity. I'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. I'm going to turn. We've got Lorraine and then Dave. I'm going to turn to Lorraine next. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm with Mark on this one. I find that the scale and height, whilst the developer mentioned about bearing so it's a relationship with the public house and the cottages, I can't see that it bears any relationship to the pubs and the cottages. It looks overbearing, and as Mark said, it's shoehorned into a small space. I'm not a fan of the design. I find it bulky and unimaginative. That's always a difficult one to play, but I don't like the design at all. The lack of communal amenity space worries me. I know that there's children's play space funds have been put to the local park, but actually the area doesn't bring anything to the imagination. There is hardly any communal space there at all. And for a gateway location or a prominent location, I think we could do better. That's my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorraine. I'm going to move straight to Dave. Thank you.
Sorry, Lorraine was briefer than I expected. I'm really struggling with this as well. Paragraph 6 on page A3 shows how well short or over the guidance this proposal is, as Councillor Cunningham has already pointed out in one or two cases, but every single one of those items, it's short where it should be more, it's over the top where it should be less. We have to set some we have to take notes. We're told we have to take note of things like the land supply, but there has to be a limit above which we cannot tolerate going, and I think this one probably does go there. So I'm in agreement with many of the comments of the North Kingston Forum. I'm in agreement with a lot of what Mr. Samuels said to us, and of course with both councillors Dunstan and Bainan as well. It really is, in my mind, the definition of what overbearing is in relation to the cottages up Canbury Park Road. I well remember the 2009 application. I was part of the decision there, so for me to say that that one was overbearing to those cottages, not to say that this one isn't, would be fairly absurd. As for references to gentle and optimizing the relationship between the buildings, I think a more suitable word would be brutal. Certainly we've been told about gateway buildings to other parts of Kingston town and Tiffin, the grammar school, County Hall. Those are what I call gentle ways of showing a gateway. This one certainly isn't that. So we're told we have to take bearing of the amount of housing that we do need. But this comparatively small amount of housing comes at very great cost to other things. And I really struggle with that, I'm afraid. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dave. I'm sure we got the message there. We've got Simon who'd like to make a comment, and then I shall probably wrap up and we'll put it to the vote. But over to you, Simon, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll make this very brief because I think I might be a bit out on a limb here. But I actually quite like the design, subject to the point I raised with Barry about the detailing, which could be covered if this application is granted by amendment to either conditions 13 or 14. I also bear in mind that on appeal from the 2009 refusal, the inspector allowed the appeal for a 6-story building, which in terms of its overbearing nature to the pub and the houses in Canbury Park Road, it is, to my mind, not much less overbearing than that which is proposed here. As I say, I think this is a design that does stand out quite nicely. I've thought long and hard about it, and I believe it is a good design. If we're going to, we talk about density, if we're going to build more homes, then in key hub destinations like this, we're going to have to build them densely. Otherwise, as the applicant has said, we're going to have to build more densely in our suburban locations. That's the choice we have. And I really do think that this site is apt for this, and I like the design, subject to the qualification I have sought to make in my question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon. And we've got, I see Roy's added his name to wishing to speak, so turn to you, Councillor Aurora, and then I'll probably, hopefully I will wrap up and we'll take to the vote. But over to you, Roy.
Thank you, Chair. Quite a few of the points that I was about to raise have been raised, so I won't repeat. They were around density and people talked about that. But the two main points which I'm of concern here is, one is paragraph 132 in the report states that, I'll read this sentence out, it says, it is recognised that the applicant has sought to ensure that the proposal sits comfortably as viewed from different locations at different distances. It's that last bit that I have difficulty in agreeing with them. I don't think this proposal sits comfortably as viewed from different locations, and certainly not at different distances, in particular when viewed from Fife Road and Canbury Park Road. I do accept what the inspector said about the 6 stories, and I think 6 stories sits relatively comfortably in that location. I find it very difficult, I'm at pains to actually accept that 9 stories does sit comfortably in this location. I actually don't think this is the case. I accept also that we are in a tilted balance, and I'm usually the first to say that we have to be mindful that we don't have enough land supply to cover the next 5 years, and therefore we've got to welcome any proposal that adds to our housing stock. I think Councillor Ryder-Mills made the point that whilst that it will add additional homes, it comes at a price, and that price is very dear. I share those feelings. It is very dear. I have concerns also about the private amenity space that is offered to the would-be occupants, albeit they're going to have these funky new, what do they call them, winter gardens. I don't think they're going to be enough. If COVID-19 has taught us one thing, and that is the importance of having amenity space outside of our houses, this scheme does very little, if anything at all, to actually address that concern. I also have concern about the affordable homes, but I won't go into that. Essentially, I'm concerned about the height and mass of it. I will, Mr. Chairman, not be supporting this proposal.
Thank you very much, Roy. David has asked, he's crept in there at the last moment. I was about to wrap up, but if you can keep it brief. Your questions were sort of comments earlier, and I did say I agree with what you were saying. But over to you, David.
Yes. One other comment that I would have made, and I think it was made earlier, I think, and that is the amenity space. I mean, actually, just to give a few £1,000 to put a few swings in a park doesn't in any way compensate, in my view, for the lack of amenity space to an area which really does need that sort of amenity space. I think generally I have difficulty with this application. I understand, as you do, the tilted balance and the problems that are associated with this, but I think this this is out of context. I think next to the pub, it looks really out of sync. I think that I understand what Mark said, not being worried about the height, but I think a good point was probably made by Roy. When you look at some of the photo montage, the height does seem to be slightly important, and if it was that much less, as the scheme which the inspector approved, it wouldn't be as incongruous as the scheme is. So I think I would prefer not to vote for this one. I would be seeking, though, to rely on the density, and it might be worthwhile getting Barry again to help us, because I don't wish to propose a rejection if in fact it's not substantiated, but I would have thought there are sufficient grounds to substantiate it, and you may feel that although Barry has answered some questions, he would give us some views on that, because I'd be mindful to turn it down, but I would not turn it down if I felt that it was going to lose on appeal so much that it would be a detriment to the borough.
Thank you, David. Just to clarify, we will be taking going to the vote first on the recommendation, which is to approve. So we will be taking that vote. If that passes, then that's it. If that vote falls, then obviously we will consider possible reasons for refusal. My own view, I tend to agree with the majority of people that have spoken this evening. Particularly, I could pick out, I won't repeat everything that's just been said by Roy and David at the end there, because I agree with, I think, everything that you've just said. The applicant themselves this evening, this is not what they said earlier, previously, I think, but this evening they said that this is a unique gateway location, and I absolutely agree with that. So I do agree with the applicant that this is a unique gateway location. They also said it was an understated, elegant design, and I have a great issue with that. To me, the design of this almost borrowed the facade facing Richmond Road borrows elements from the townhouse building, the university townhouse building in Penryn Road. Different materials, I know. Theirs is concrete, this is brick, but the way it's designed with the sort of lattice work, it borrows elements from that. I particularly like the townhouse design. I did right from the start, and I still do, and I think it's an exemplar building. But it's a completely different location. The townhouse has room around it. It has room in front of it. It is not. This, to me, is a very contrived application. It's contrived for a number of reasons. One of which is that it needs to dig a basement next to the adjoining semi-detached house. I've realised that the party wall comes into that, and it's not a planning consideration as such, the disruption that could cause the neighbouring house. But I just think that typifies the fact that this is such a contrived application. To me, it is out of scale. We have to judge it as it is. The pub, we must assume, is going to stay there forever. Yes, there might be an application. It might come along to redevelop the pub site at some stage in the future, but we can't rely on that. And the applicants themselves, they say they don't own the pub, and they can't therefore take that into their development. So I just think having a 2-storey pub next to a 9-storey building, which I think is a particularly, I don't agree. Simon likes the design, and I can. It's. We all have to take our own view on that. I don't like the design. I think it's far too box-like for an exemplar gateway building. So I don't like. I think it's overpowering. The 9 stories is far too much. The 6 stories, one could argue about that, but obviously there's precedent in fact as far as the scheme that was approved at appeal. So I could go on at length about the various other aspects of it, but on mass and scale and design in particular, I could not support this. And I think those items, the mass scale and design, significantly and demonstrably outweighs the benefits from the scheme. Obviously, there are benefits. It brings housing, etc., and it cleans up that corner, which is at the moment a bit of a mess, I would say. So there are benefits, but I do think that the mass scale in particular, and I'll bring in probably, I could bring in probably David's point about that density, although that's tied up with the mass and scale, significantly and demonstrably outweighs the benefits. With that, I'm going to put it to the vote. So over to you, Sam. We'll take a roll call. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I will now call upon each councillor in turn. Please can you indicate how you wish to vote by saying for, against or abstain. Please can you also confirm that you've been present for the duration of the meeting. Councillor Archer.
I've been present for the whole duration of the meeting, and I'm going to vote against.
Councillor Aurora.
Chair, I vote against this application. I can confirm I have been here throughout the meeting. Thank you.
Councillor Bailey.
I'm voting for it, and I've been here for the meeting.
Councillor Bainon.
I'm voting against, and I have been here for the duration of the meeting.
Councillor Cunningham. I think you may be on mute, Councillor Cunningham.
Sorry, I've been here for the whole meeting and I'm voting against.
Councillor Dunstone.
I'm voting against, and I've been here for the duration of the meeting.
Councillor Edwards.
I too have been here for the duration of the meeting, and I am going to vote in favour of the proposal.
Councillor Heap.
I confirm I've been here for the whole of the meeting, and I'm voting against.
Councillor Mole.
I can confirm I've been here for the whole of the meeting, and I'm going to abstain.
Councillor Ryder Mills.
I've been here for the whole of the meeting, and I'm going to vote against.
And Councillor Self.
Yeah, I've been present throughout, and I vote against.
So, Chair, that is 2 for, 8 against, and one abstention.
Thank you very much, Sam. So that motion has fallen. So the application is not approved. we now go on to, I will move a second, I will now move a motion to refuse this application. Before we take a vote on it, obviously we will discuss reasons, and we will be clear on what those reasons are before the vote is taken. Do we have a seconder for that vote, please, for the motion to refuse the application, please?
I can second.
Thank you very much, Mark. That takes us on to, before we go to a vote on that, we need to discuss reasons. Barry will have been listening and heard what I had to say and what others have to say. It seems to me to resolve around density, mass, scale, and design. I would like to bring in. Do any other members, notwithstanding, we know some members voted.
We're still on the first application
for it, but I think you're just to remind you, Dave, your microphone is on.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other? Does any member want to bring any other reasons or think of any other reasons for refusal? We're not trying to pepper pot it, the reasons. We're trying to come up with the reasons we think are the most have substance behind them, and it doesn't seem to be any. So Barry, could you help us out now in your role as head of development management on maybe some wording on mass, scale, density and design?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We would, of course, need to discover what the harm is from those elements we've discussed. So, because we would need to be clear, because there is a likelihood that this will end up in front of an inspector, and of course, the inspector would be cognizant of the transcript of this meeting and of the case the council would make. So, refusal. So we've identified the harm. Now, I wonder whether what I've heard is that it's an over development of the site, which manifests itself in a under provision of amenity space and a development which has a detrimental impact on the character and appearance of the area by reason of its scale and bulk and mass, and that design therefore is of such a magnitude of harmfulness, or they will have to obviously find better words than that, that significantly outweighs the benefits which are highlighted in the report. So certainly we can craft those wordings. So the overdevelopment of the site manifests itself in under provision of outdoor amenity space, and also presents a unduly prominent, bulky, massy building, which, given its prominent location, is detrimental to the character and appearance of the area. Now, I think they're the reasons you put forward. I don't know whether I've covered everything.
I would include design, but maybe other members have different views on that, or maybe you would advise against that, Barry. But
I think we would have to be careful and as you said, not just finding reasons for the sake of reason, pepper potting reasons of refusal. We have to keep them focused. If members didn't like the design, we would then have to understand what's not liked about the design and what harm flows from what might be perceived as a poor design if we arrive at that conclusion. So it might be that we need to have a bit more of a discussion about what people might find objectionable about the design.
I could say what I don't like about the design, but not necessarily in planning speak. But so I just speak as a layman. What I don't like about it is, from the Richmond Road, you've got these. The design of it accentuates the tallness of the building, because you've got this lattice structure. I did say I'm not putting this necessarily in planning speak, but you've got a lattice, but the continuous upright elements of it accentuates its height. and draws attention to the fact that you've got this very tall building next to the pub, which I imagine is Victorian. I don't know if it is or not, but I imagine it is. So you've got a 2-story pub, which we must assume is going to stay there forever in determining this application. And it's next to this building where we've gone out of our way to accentuate the fact that it's 9 stories against the 2-story pub. In addition to the other design bit I don't like is the bricked up windows, we'll call them. And we know that's done so as not to sterilise the site to prevent future development on the pub site. But it's a catch-22 for the developer, I would have thought. To me, is that if this is, and they said themselves, a unique gateway location, then having a bland brick wall, albeit now with bricked up windows in it, just isn't good enough. But that I appreciate. I'm not putting that in good planning speak, Barry, but
it sounds perfectly reasonable to me in terms of planning speak. But I think we'd have to be careful that we couldn't raise things that might have been able to be addressed by conditions. So we might have been able to address the lack of relief on that elevation. But what I might have heard from you is that the proposal, by reason of its design, represents a discordant feature in the street scene and fails to smoothly transition from a low-rise to a high-rise form, which is what the opposite of what they're saying it does. So you'd be saying that by reason of its design, it accentuates its prominence, therefore representing a discordant feature, which fails to smoothly transition between a low-rise to a high-rise form of development, and as such, taken together, represents a feature which is detrimental to the character and appearance of the area.
Thank you, Barry. That's exactly what I was trying to get at. And if I was clever enough, that's what I would have said. But thank you very much for coming up with that form of words. Where do we go from here, Barry? As in reasons, I think could you summarise what our reasons for refusing could be?
So the reasons that these are subjective matters now we're talking about, and subjective matters are subjective, and to be calling them subjective matters, of course. So there are elements which you clearly, there are areas you as a committee or the majority of the committee dislike other design. So I think you'd be looking at those issues we've raised. The overdevelopment of the site manifests itself in the poor provision of amenity space, which provides for a poor standard of residential amenity for future occupants of the development. That overdevelopment and the design taken together results in a prominent building, a prominent discordant building, which fails to smoothly transition between a low-rise to a high-rise development. And all those things taken together result in a development which is detrimental to the character and appearance of the area to such an extent that it significantly demonstrably outweighs the benefits of the delivery of homes and affordable homes, and then the policies would be added to that.
Thank you very much, Barry. I'm very happy with that form of word. Has any other members got any other thoughts, comments on that before we go to a vote? And it looks like it's Roy. Is it you?
Yeah, Chair. I think it's been covered. I just want to confirm, if I may, with you, Ms. Lennox. I think you did mention poor provision of amenity space, didn't you?
Yes, you did.
You did. Okay, that's fine. I just
you started on that, didn't you? Yeah. Yes. Rebecca, did you want to come in now?
Thank you. Yeah.
Rebecca, did you want to come in now?
No, it's okay.
Okay, thank you. Dave's indicating, I think. Dave.
Yeah, I did put my name in. I do like the phrases, detrimental to the character of the area. I do accept what Barry says about it's a question of balance. We're asked in several places in the report to put great weight on this and great weight on that. But there are places where there is weight in the other direction as well, and it's a question of balance. And I think that we should be saying that it is discordant, it is detrimental to the character of the area. And it's not just the cottages up Canbury Park Road, even more modern developments in Canbury Park Road. I'm trying to think of the names of the Sigrist Square, is it? Which is, it's red brick. It's more dense than it appears to be, in fact, because it's quite well balanced. But this just adds a totally discordant element to it, and is not a gentle way of introducing the town centre, even in terms of comparison with the student housing on the other side of the railway bridge. This one is much more discordant than that.
Thank you, Dave. I think the wording that Barry came up with, which summarised what we collectively were saying, covers all that. So with that, with the wording that Barry came and went through, does any member want me to ask Barry to go all through that again, or are we happy? I'm clear what the reasons were, and Barry's saying, he's shaking his head. I think we're clear. It was on the recording. We know what those reasons are. It comes down to amenity space, mass scale design, and mass scale and design. But using the wording principally that Barry said, it may need tidying up, I suspect, in due course. With that, I'm going to put it to the vote. So I'm going to turn to Sam again to take the roll call for the vote, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So please indicate how you wish to vote by saying for, against, or abstain. And please can you also confirm that you've been present for the duration of the meeting?
And I'm just going to interrupt. Obviously, if you're voting for this time, you're voting for the motion to refuse. And if you're voting against, you're voting against the motion to refuse. Over to you. Back to you, Sam. Thank you.
Councillor Archer.
For, and I have been in attendance for the entirety of the meeting. Thank you.
Councillor Aurora.
Thank you. I vote for this motion, and I confirm I have been here throughout the meeting.
Councillor Bailey.
I'm voting against, and I've been here for the duration of the meeting.
Councillor Bainon.
Yeah, I vote for, and I have been here for the duration of the meeting.
Councillor Cunningham.
I'm voting for, and I've been here for the duration of the meeting.
Councillor Dunstone.
I'm voting for, and I've been here for the duration of the meeting.
Councillor Edwards.
I've been here and continue to be here throughout the meeting, and I'm voting again.
Councillor Heap.
I'm voting for the motion, and I've been here throughout the meeting.
Councillor Mole.
I've remained in the meeting for the entirety, and I vote for.
Councillor Ryder Mills.
I'm voting for, and I've been present during the entire meeting.
And Councillor South.
I've been present throughout, and I vote for the motion. Thank you.
So that's 9 for and 2 against, Chair.
Thank you very much, Sam. So that concludes that item, and thank you everybody much for your patience throughout that and for your input. We've had a request for a short comfort break, so we will now take, before we take the next application, which is Nikon House further along Richmond Road, right at the other end of Richmond Road, we'll take a short comfort break. It is now 21:23. We'll reconvene very promptly at 21:30. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're live, Chair.
Thank you. Good. Welcome back, everybody. And I can confirm that all members are present and correct. We now turn to the second planning application we have for this evening, which is the reference number is 19/03090, and it's for the site of Nikon House at 380 Richmond Road, Kingston upon Thames. It's to demolish the existing buildings and the erection of a self-storage facility, use class B8, although Barry will probably clarify the exact use class that will now be, with associated vehicular access and servicing, car and cycle parking and landscaping works. So I'm going to turn straight to Barry Lomax, our Head of Planning or Head of Development Control, to present this item, please. Over to you, Barry. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hopefully you should see the presentation on screen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. So the application is as set out in the agenda paper for the demolition of the existing building and the erection of a storage building with an end user proposed to be the big yellow storage. On screen now you see the application site. The application site is the entrance to the wider industrial area, which members may be familiar with, located towards the end of Richmond Road, travelling towards Richmond. Here we see a slightly outdated photograph showing the site next to the fire station and fronting the industrial units. And the members may recall, some might have been here some time ago, that the opposite of this site would have been part of the old aircraft factory. Here we have some photographs showing the site as laid out currently. On the right-hand side of the screen here, you see the flatted development, and then to the left of the site, you see the fire station. This is a view of the site taken from within the industrial estate. Here we have a location plan showing the site as outlined in red, and then we have a slightly more detailed proposal. The site is approximately 0.3 of a hectare. The total floor space proposed is 2,294, with the possibility to increase that with mezzanine levels. That is comparable to the existing floor level on site. Total number of car parking spaces is 9. That is a reduction on site, but that reduction mirrors the change in type of use of the site. And there are 8 cycle spaces proposed. On screen now, you see the elevations. The height of the building currently stands at around 13.6 metres and is about 56.5 metres in width. Here we see the footprint of the building showing the entrance area to the front. And then we have a look at the proposed front. The proposal is about 13.4 metres to the ridge and about 11.2 metres to the eaves. This is comparable to the existing building on site. And the building, in terms of its rear elevation, its width and depth at 57.5. It is its width rather. Seeing now on screen the proposed elevations, this proposal has gone through significant iterations with the planning team, taking on board comments of urban design colleagues, so as to introduce more of a brick solid building as opposed to a one with greater glazing, and one that may be not being pejorative to the big yellow storage, but one that might depart from its usual buildings, like one might have seen on London Road in Kingston. This is a subtler building, which officers consider is more in keeping with the site in which it sits. You see now the proposed self-storage with the proposal to landscape the front. It is acknowledged that this building will stand forward of the existing building. As you notice, it comes forward. However, it comes forward to create a building line which is commensurate with the neighbouring flatted accommodation. So whilst it moves forward, or would move forward from where it is now, officers consider it wouldn't represent a incongruous or discordant feature in the street scene. The site will be accessed from within the industrial estate with parking to the rear within the service yard, with self-storage on the ground and first floor. And then as you move from the second to the third floor, this area is indicated on screen, the proposed self-storage. That is an area that would be able to be taken up with the mountable mezzanine levels as storage requirements dictate, or as the customers would dictate. Moving to the third floor again, which would be demountable mezzanine floor, and then up to the proposed roof. A roof is a hipped roof with photovoltaic cells for the sustainability requirements. Some of the key areas here to look at. This site has an employment use protection policy DM17 of the local plan. This proposal again would be an employment use, albeit a different use to what it is at the moment. It is acknowledged that in terms of direct employment, there would be a reduction from direct employees. However, as set out by the applicant and substantiated from evidence submitted by Quad, a yellow storage, any storage facility has the capability of having secondary employment, if you will, small businesses in the area using it for employment, people who would be working from home in niche cottage, online businesses would be able to use it. So the Quad projections, Quad being a consultancy, suggests that between 80 and 275 jobs could be supported through this scheme if approved, and that variance depends on the level of mezzanine flooring that would be accommodated within the building. So in terms of direct employment, we're looking at about 3 to 4 if the scheme would be approved, with off-site supporting a significant increase in jobs. One thing that is to bear in mind, of course, and we have touched on this slightly previously, governments have changed how we might look at use classes in areas such as this, with a move from what would be a B1 use to now being in an E use. And that indicates that the government are supporting more of a flexible approach into how one would support employment uses within in areas such as this, with greater flexibility to move between previous use classes. Some of the key issues here relate to residential amenity. We've covered that in the report, identifying hours of use and how that will be accommodated. Traffic impact has been assessed by our friends and colleagues in the highways team, and they're happy with the proposed traffic impact, number of car parking spaces and cycle spaces, subject to conditions relating to construction management plan. And taking all those things into consideration, and importantly, an omission in the report in terms of not attributing the comments to the North Kingston Forum. The North Kingston Forum have objected to the scheme, and their reasons for objection are set out in the late paper. And I thought it was just important that their comments weren't blended in with others' comments, but the comments are set out separately. But in conclusion, taking into account the employment land policy, the design of the scheme, officers consider that the proposal has a positive recommendation, subject to legal agreement and to the conditions set out in the agenda papers. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You're on mute, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry about that. It has to be one time during the meeting. I suppose. I do apologise. We do have speakers registered on this application. We've got speaking as an objector. We've got Valerie Field, who I know is in the meeting, and for the applicants, we've got Simon Allen, who I think is here, and we've also got Andrew Della, who I don't think is in the meeting, but that can be clarified when we get to that, I suppose. But we're going to turn first to Valerie. I'll just remind you, you've got 5 minutes to speak, and we'll let you know when you've got 1 minute remaining before your time is up. So it's over to you, Valerie. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Right. I'll start. I'm asking the question why this aesthetically pleasing 35-year-old brick building is being demolished and not repurposed, reconfigured within its existing shell. Big Yellow state the building is tired but supply no evidence. This, I think, is an act of architectural, environmental and ecological vandalism with destruction of perfectly good brick, trees, shrubs, etc. The overall proposed floor space has increased considerably from that existing. The road frontage is wider and taller, and the building line has been moved closer to the road, making it unsympathetic and overpowering to surrounding areas, unlike the Nikon and its predecessor Salon buildings and the Royal Park Gate development on which I live. A recent local domestic application was rejected for a change in building line. It's not me, but I can supply the reference if required. The current site provides a key landmark into Kingston, unlike this proposed obtrusive warehouse structure which causes significant loss of local character. Reference to the planning summary, paragraph 6 says the access will be from 7 morning till 11 p.m. This will increase traffic noise and lighting nuisance for residents. Paragraph 7 states building will support 82 jobs rising to 275. Little details supplied. This does assume that every single unit let will support a new job. I don't think this is true. Units are leased for a variety of reasons, not all business related. Even where they are, many will be relocating storage, not creating new employment opportunities. The reality is only 3 to 4 jobs with a few new opportunities will happen. This will significantly decrease employment opportunities and business for the shops and cafes of Ham Parade compared to the previous office complex of 100 staff. Para 9 to 13. There have been no figures on the expected increase in traffic on the current situation in and out of the site. My observations over 3 recent separate days have shown a current average of 200 vehicle movements in and out per hour, only 2 on bicycles. Traffic has waited up to 4 minutes to enter or exit to the right, and pedestrians are often impeded. It's a busy junction for vehicles and pedestrians, and extra use may be needed. Extra use may need installation of traffic lights in the future, something the council should have noted. It is doubtful that the proposed 9 parking spaces will be sufficient, given all other parking in the complex is already allocated to businesses. Para 13, air and noise pollution will increase with the extra traffic and the extended opening hours. Demolition and building phases over 12 to 15 months will also significantly affect air quality and noise for residents, school children and others, especially given the proximity to 3 local schools, with children, parents, others frequently crossing this junction throughout the day. This application will create increased traffic levels and road safety issues for all. Council noted that Big Yellow's construction management plan lacked health and safety input. This lax attitude of Big Yellow is reflected by their recent tipping of hardcore to block the Richmond Road entrance, nearly blocking a rainwater drain, even when heavy rains and thunderstorms were predicted. They did this rather than sort their security in a planned manner. This was removed, and councillors and planning officials have seen photographs of this. Para 51. Maybe 2 or 3 direct employees will use these bicycle parking, but it's really very unlikely that goods from units will be transported this way. Comments on the council recommendations, paragraph 8. Hours from 7 to 11 do not consider nuisance to residents, particularly in the block of flats. Paragraph 15. Lighting hours for the site are important to residents and should be restricted. Drainage, given the tendency for local flooding on this road, even with moderate rainfall, needs very close scrutiny. In conclusion, this building is of unsympathetic size and design and of questionable benefit to the area for residents, employment or local business. There will be considerable disruption to residents, school children and others during demolition and building work, and the increased air lighting and noise pollution and the associated risk to health this will bring need to be considered. We are yet to see plans for a proposed signage, a real issue for character, or whether the roof will interfere with telecommunications equipment at the fire station. There are alternatives that it could be used for, such as an adult education centre. We've all seen good and bad planning decisions over the years, some which we regret. Let's not make this mistake here that could have a negative impact on the community for years to come. It should be further from
5 minutes.
Okay.
I speak on behalf of several residents when I make this.
Okay. Thank you very much, Valerie. You just made it in the 5 minutes. Thank you very much. Stay in the meeting. Members may have questions for you after the applicant has spoken. For the applicant, we've got registered Simon Allen, who I can see is here. Good evening, Simon.
Yeah. Good evening, Councillor.
We've also got Andrew Diller, but I don't think Andrew's.
It's just me speaking tonight, Councillor.
Okay.
So I'll be taking up the allotted time.
it's over to you. You know you've got 5 minutes. And
Indeed. Okay, thank you very much, and thank you very much, everyone. As I say, yeah, my name is Simon. I'm from Big Yellow, and I'm responsible for the preparation of the planning application before you this evening. Big Yellow acquired this site as we see it as an excellent addition to our self-storage network within the M25, where we currently have 41 trading stores. As you're aware, the site is designated as part of the St George's Industrial Estate, and the introduction of a Class B8 self-storage facility is fully compliant with policy. In terms of its design, the scale, massing and appearance of the building has been informed by comments received from the Council's design officer prior to submission of the application. The scale of the building has been judged to reflect the surrounding building heights, being just 850 millimetres higher than the current building, and takes into account the residential and non-residential interface. The proposed finishes are high quality external facing materials, which are locally and contextually appropriate in this environment. The building will be predominantly red brick in order to offer a design appearance that complements the neighbouring fire station and the surrounding residential area. In addition, the landscaping proposed creates a more structured arrangement which will soften the edge of the site and introduce more greenery along the road than is existing. Some neighbours have raised concerns regarding impacts to their daylight and sunlight. As part of this application, we've submitted a daylight and sunlight assessment, which concludes that only Grantham Court properties were considered relevant, and the analysis concluded that all windows were fully compliant with BRE guidelines. I would also like to mention comments regarding noise. A noise assessment was commissioned as part of the application, and it was concluded that the predicted noise levels to the nearest residential dwellings during the worst case daytime hour would be below the background level and therefore unobtrusive. The concerns around traffic movements, the transport statement which accompanies the application concludes the proposed development is anticipated to result in a significant weekday reduction in peak periods when compared with the current permitted office use. Overall traffic movements will be significantly reduced, which in turn will improve the surrounding environment with respect to air quality. Please note the intention is to access the site from the road which leads to the industrial estate, and the current point of access on Richmond Road will be closed off, which is a real positive in highways terms. All parking and loading activity will take place within a covered yard at the rear of the site, away from sensitive areas. It's anticipated the development will take around 12 months to complete, during which time we will strictly adhere to the construction-related conditions imposed by the council. This will ensure disruption is minimised during demolition and construction activities. This includes ensuring all necessary and appropriate measures are taken to control the impact of noise, dust and vibration to within acceptable levels. And now, importantly, I'd like to touch upon the economic benefits the proposed development will bring to the local area. As has already been said, typically a Big Yellow store employs 3 or 4 staff directly. But underlying this is a very positive employment story, resulting in a significant contribution to the local economy. Across our 76 stores, Big Yellow is home to over 7,000 businesses, who in turn employ 23,000 people who depend on our stores to run their business. Once fully occupied, it is forecast the store on Richmond Road, if approved by the committee this evening, would indirectly support approximately 275 jobs, with around 15 to 20% of the occupiers and 30% of the space being occupied by business customers. The vast majority of these customers will be local small startups who have never rented space anywhere else before. There are a huge range of businesses using our stores, from e-retailers to accountants, from IT to engineers. Envisage, if you will, a successful small business in Kingston, currently working from home, gradually filling rooms, garages and sheds with stock. For the business to expand, the next step is to locate commercially available space. And this is where self-storage is ideally placed to help, as we can offer small amounts of space on flexible terms, allowing a low risk, low cost start followed by rapid scaling up. In effect, the store will act as a business incubator for the local area. I would suggest to the committee that given the challenging economic future before us, there will be many local people looking to reinvent themselves as a small business, and a Big Yellow store on this site is well placed to assist with economic recovery. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon. We'll turn to questions from members. Do any members have questions for the objector to Valerie Field? If you do, can you let me know visually or by typing your name in the chat panel? And there are no questions for Valerie. Do we have any questions for the applicant, in this case, Simon? If you do, can you indicate either visually on my screen or in the chat function? And there are no questions. In which case, I thank you both, Valerie and Simon, for your contribution. Thank you very much. That concludes the public participation on this application. You may now leave the meeting and you can follow the rest of the proceedings on the YouTube stream. But thank you very much for coming. Thank you. I turn to Barry Lomax to sweep up by the planning officer. Have you got any points you'd like to come back to from following the representations made by the objector and the applicant? Don't feel as though it's absolutely necessary. Over to you, Barry.
I should be very quick, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Just a couple of points. One thing important to keep at the back of our minds, or if not in front of our minds, this is an industrial estate. It's an allocated industrial site within the local plan. So therefore, there will be movement, there will be some activity associated with it. It is, so I know the objector spoke about education or other uses. This site is part of the borough's allocation in terms of a plan for industrial uses such as this. So it does meet with the industrial land employment policies we have in the plan. One quick point about the traffic generation. A B1A office, now Class E office that the building currently is, generates a significant number of movements in the AM and PM peak. You're looking at around 60 movements in the AM and PM peak. The proposed B8 use that this is would reduce that during the weekday to around, it's in the single figures. I think it's below 10 in the AM PM peak across Monday to Friday. It is acknowledged that there will be a slight increase in the number of Saturday peak movements. There are 27 movements in the Saturday peak, and that some way reflects the type of use that the building is proposed to be. I think that's all I've got to add, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We go to questions from members to planning officer, which is the case is Barry. I've certainly got a question I'd like to ask, but David's coming very quickly. So over to you, David. If anybody else has got questions, add your name in the chat function. But over to you, David, for your question. Thank you.
Okay. My question to Barry is to try and understand more the employment issue, because I've heard what the applicant said about lots of other businesses and secondary employment. Can I ask him what checks have been made on this as a system? Because we've heard that there are only a small number of full-time staff. And what assurances do we have that in fact there will be secondary employment on this site? Because obviously one of the other aims of a store like this is to provide lock-up storage for people like myself who might want to store things. And on the same principle that if you had a retail element, you wouldn't count all the people who came to purchase goods as part of the employment. So I'd like to understand from Barry, because we've heard from the applicant what he is saying, and I have insufficient knowledge or experience to know whether that is correct. But we are looking at our officers to tell us whether we can reasonably consider that the employment is in the 80 to 275 mark rather than the 3, which are the permanent staff. So that would be my first question. I've got some other questions which may be to do with the detail, but it's very much to do with the management, because at the moment the agenda talks about a 7 to 11 p.m. But I think I remember from the applicant when we heard him before that the full-time staff are not there all the time. I don't know what time they finish, but from memory it was or normal office hours where they are there. So I'd be very interested to know what sort of mechanism would be proposed when anybody, no doubt, can just come along with a key and use the facility. So I think there is a very large management element as far as that's concerned. Another element that I want to bring up I took exception, I think, to the description about the existing building being tired, and I do remember when it was came for planning, and I do remember, in fact, I remember it was quite a there was quite a lot of discussion at the time, because I remember the building before, because it was a paint factory before, which was an equally attractive building, although the smells were such that the residents were very happy to see that aspect to go. But I really don't think that the existing building is in any way tired. In fact, it does seem to fit in quite well with the locality. I do realise, however, that we're here to understand and determine an application, and we can't say, well, we don't want the present building to be substituted. But those are the points for Barry, but I would have some other points to make later on.
That's fine, David. Thank you. Barry, I'll turn to you. Industrial use and the jobs question, I suppose, is the first one. The hours of operation is paragraph 6. When you get to that, it says it will be staffed between 8 and 6 Monday to Friday, 9 to 6 Saturdays, and 10 to 4 on Sundays. But access will be between 7 a.m. and 11 p.m. So I suppose the question is, what's to stop people? Obviously, people would have a key or access code to get in and out. What's to stop them using that at midnight or 2 o'clock in the morning? And I'm not quite sure. Well, David's last point was a question maybe about the tired existing building, but I think he answered his own question there. But over to you, Barry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the first question about employment, only 3 to 4 staff will be directly employed. But looking at the application and the evidence submitted, Quad, a reputable consultancy, do talk about the ability for sites as this able to support extra employment. Now, we're saying to members that as officers, this does provide an option for the borough to support extra jobs. However, there's only going to be direct employment of 3 to 4. That is where we see that we can confirm there will be some fixed people employed here, 3 to 4. The 8T to 275 depends on mezzanine flooring going in. The 275 end of it, the 80 is an average working out on if there's no mezzanine, but we can't guarantee that, and I don't think the applicant can guarantee that. It just provides or facilitates the potential for that. So we certainly couldn't guarantee there will be supporting of 80 to 275 jobs. What we can say is, based on the evidence we've seen, it is likely that it would support some off-site jobs. With regards to, and of course, what we need to keep in the back of our mind is policy DM17 of the local plan says that you shouldn't change a employment use out of an employment use unless you've marketed. This is going from an employment use to an employment use. So therefore it fits squarely with DM17 policy. It fits in there with that regard. And of course, looking at now the changes to the use classes order, I wasn't able to find a legal agreement for this site, but it is possible that this site could move to other uses within use class E without the requirement for permission, given the changes that come into effect on the 1st of September. But we're not putting weight on that. We're saying it's acceptable in and of itself because of policy DM17. With regards to management, you're correct. The building would only be manned or operated between the hours set out in the report. It won't be the same hours as it is operational. I'm not overly familiar with these yellow storage or other storage, but I understand that the locks are time locked. So even though you can come in until 11, that you can't operate the lock after that time. But if members have concerns about that, we could ask for a management plan to be submitted and to be discharged, setting out in detail how the site will be managed outside of the hours it would be staffed. And finally, with regards to the condition of the building, I suppose this is a subjective matter, but officers aren't putting any weight on that type of proposal. We're saying the new design is a good design in and of itself, and we're saying that that is a positive. We're not suggesting that replacing the buildings there is a positive. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Barry. I'd like to come in with a sort of follow-up question. You mentioned use class E. Could we put a condition on that this this will be, should this be approved, it will be use class E, but notwithstanding that, could be, to me, it should not be used for some of the use class E uses. Like in this particular location, what I'm trying to say is this is a locally significant industrial site, and I think that's the important industrial site. So it has to have some sort of use and not retail or sale of hot food for consumption on the premises, etc. Indoor sport, recreation or fitness use, all of which is use class E. So could we put a condition on saying this is use class E, but notwithstanding that, it is only for use as presumably the last category of that, office, research and development or any light industrial process, if that's the correct one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm just double checking here, and a B8 use continues to exist after we're going to get back into this discussion we had the other day. So this will remain as a B8 with limited flexibility. However, members might want to restrict how this is operated because, of course, B8 uses can vary significantly as storage distribution. So it might be that members would like to limit this to operational as a storage unit as set out in the application. So limiting it to a storage unit, a storage akin to a big yellow storage. We'd have to finesse that wording of a condition, but we want to restrict it to being used as part of the application and no permitted changes outside of B8. B8 can go to a B1, but also within B8 because it could become a more intensely used distribution centre. So I'm sorry, I've just confused everything. But in short, we can put a condition on seeking it to be restricted to a storage unit as per the terms of the application, and that would cover us against any possible changes.
Thank you, Barry. I think I've got that. I don't want to hold the meeting. I want to move on. Personally, the other units on the St George's Industrial Estate, for example, we've got uses. There's electrical wholesalers and all sorts there. But I think what you said is fine. I've got Leslie and then Roy for questions. Leslie.
Thank you, Chair. I think Barry touched on it a little bit, but I just wanted you to sort of clarify what these demountable mezzanines were. Was this some sort of flexible space that could be used for something else that wasn't storage per se? And perhaps you could just expand upon that, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, they could only be used. So a mezzanine floor is a demountable flooring system that you put in. So that would be to create extra space in the building. So the building as set out will have big voids in it. So you'd have a ground and a first floor and then a big void up to the roof that could have an extra floor put into it. So I'm not sure whether you can see my gesturing on screen. An extra floor put in to enable extra storage. So there is a flexibility in how the building could be occupied. Somebody may want to have a larger space to store large things. So you wouldn't have the mezzanine, or you have the mezzanine to create extra floors. But they would all still be within the storage use, not other uses.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And Roy. Roy, you're on mute. You're on mute, Roy.
Sorry, Chair. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. My main question actually was to do use class E, and you've asked that question, which has been answered now, so thank you for that. But the one other question I had, the applicant talked about the building being predominantly, the proposed building being predominantly red brick. My question is, do we have any CGIs with regard to that? I'd like to see, I didn't pick up that it's predominantly red brick, so I'd like to see the CGIs if there are any available.
Thank you, Roy. I know that we've got, this is not a CGI, we've got these coloured drawings That's all that I've seen. I haven't seen a CGI. We haven't got any CGIs, have we, Barry?
Sorry, let me just see whether I can share my screen again. It might not let me because I'm maybe.
Oh, now we have.
So this is this is more. This is what the building was originally proposed. This is before. So you see these panels of red bricks on the front. So it is previously it was more of this cladding elements and there was some brickwork, but now there's a significant, I say, improvement in that brickwork and the glazing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Barry. I think that's the best that we're going to get this evening. So hopefully that's helped a bit, Roy. Before we go to comments, again, I'll formally move the recommendation on pages B12 to B20, and any changes in the late material. In doing that, I'm not passing any comment on the merits or otherwise of this application. I will ask for a seconder to to be absolutely sure of this. Do we have a seconder for that?
Yeah, I'm happy to second.
Thank you, Kim. That moves us on. We can now go on to members' comments and debate. And I got David. David, was that was the? I'm not sure whether that was from.
It was to follow up on the point that Roy made as a question.
Keep going.
Yes.
Over to you, Dave.
I would like to follow up to Barry the question that Roy made about the look of it. I do appreciate that any occupant there will want to put publicity on their building, but some of the rather garish yellow signs and things which seem to have gone up on other developments, and obviously I've been looking around at other developments, so I haven't seen any large signs on any of the drawings that we have seen. Of course, that's not to stop an applicant making a application for it, but my question to Barry is, has he had anything regarding large signs, and if we were to approve it, would be able to make a condition on the size and general appearance of those signs, because I think to have a really large yellow wall along there would detract considerably from the ambience of the neighbourhood.
Thank you. Turn to you, Barry. I absolutely 100% endorse what David has just said. I think it's a very good point. Where are we?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The adverts would come under the advertisement regulations, so there would be a requirement for an application, but we could certainly condition, if members were minded, for a signage strategy to be submitted and approved in writing by the local planning authority as part of this application. That might provide the comfort that members are looking for.
I would certainly go like that. Yeah, thank you, Barry. And if there's nobody else, I've got David. Nobody else is indicating they particularly want to speak on this. I don't have any great strong feelings on it, other than I would be generally supportive. I would want this extra condition on the signage strategy that you just mentioned, Barry, and also the use class E restriction that we spoke about earlier. Is that okay, Barry?
Yes, but not use class E, fixing it to BH use as per terms of the application. But yes, as we spoke before.
You know what? I think that is what I was getting to. Yeah, thank you. Are we all? If we're happy with that, we can go to the vote. So we're going to put this. I'm going to put this to the vote now. I've got suddenly appeared in the last minute is Dave and then David again. So Dave, before we go to the vote, you've just squeezed in. Over to you, Dave.
Yeah, just to say that I really do think the applicant is over-egging the employment opportunities. It's much more that there's potential for jobs to be supported. They're not even dependent on it. They will be supported. But notwithstanding that, I suspect that this is probably as good an application as we're going to get for the site.
Thank you, Dave. And I certainly think I'll take the employment figures, certainly the 275 with a big pinch of salt. It doesn't mean I'm going to vote against it, but I think take that with a big pinch of salt. David, you said you'd like to add something.
Yeah, well, I think my points would be, after you've taken the vote, if it was in favour of it, I think there are a number of conditions I would want to discuss, or whether you want to take conditions before you go to vote or not.
We need to take any conditions that we'd like to attach before we go to the vote. Yes, we need to.
Right. Well, we have briefly mentioned them, but let me just reiterate. Number one, we've mentioned the sign. Secondly, I think is the management plan, because I think that is very important. And I think we need to be assured that there is a mechanism that isn't going to cause a lot of noise and disruption to the neighbourhood. And I really want to see that quite a strong requirement that a management plan has to be agreed before some point in the construction, not just before after they've moved in. So those are the two main conditions that I would have on it. I suppose I would query whether it has to be 11 p.m. or whether the applicant would reduce it to slightly less than that. I do accept that their method of operation may require certainly after office hours, but I'm sure the residents would like to see that reduced to the minimum possible time.
Thank you, David. Personally, I think 7 to 11, I don't see there being loads of use, shall we say, between 10 and 11 at night. So I would be happy with 11, but does anybody else want to come in on that? I don't know. Did you want to move that as I mean, we can take a vote on that if you like, David, but personally, I would be happy with the 7 to 11. But
well, I don't want to limit an applicant to run his business. So it really boils down to the management plan as to what happens to people who are acting and in the building when there's no full-time staff or any caretakers of any way. That's the basic element. 11 o'clock would not seem unreasonable if it was managed properly, but if it's not managed properly, just about any time when there isn't full-time staff is going to be unacceptable.
Yeah, I agree with that. Dave, Councillor Ryder Mills, did you want to come in on that point? You indicated you wanted to add something, but was it on that point?
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. I'm with David very much on both the management plan and the signage plan. As to the 11 o'clock or midnight or whatever, I think the number of people who would be using it would be very minimal, and to set it earlier than 11 might actually mean that somebody who's working late suddenly finds that he can't get the stuff to the store. So I think 11 is.
It won't be allowed out. Sorry.
Anyway, I think so. Barry, before I'm going to put this to the vote sort of now, but I think we're in general agreement that we would like conditions put on. You summed it up correctly in the signage strategy. I think I absolutely want that. The management plan, totally agree with what David said on that, and the use class B8 issue. With those three things, we can put it to the vote, I think, yeah?
Chair, I have indicated there to speak.
Oh, so I do apologise, Roy, sorry.
No problem. Conditions, if it hasn't already been done, and perhaps Mr. Bell can confirm this, could we strengthen the condition with respect to the choice of external materials that they've used? so that they come to the council for approval on those, please.
Could do. I'm just going to finding the condition. Bear with. Recommendation.
Could I expand that into a comment, with your permission, Chair?
Yeah, keep going. Yeah, I'm just
Okay.
looking.
In the last presentation, we talked much about gateway buildings. In my mind, this actually represents a gateway building because as you come from Ham, this is the first building that you hit when you enter Kingston. So I think it is important that we do control what goes there, and that is my reasoning behind. If we are minded to allow this, I will miss the Nikon building. If I'm honest, I do like that building. I do take the objector's view that it is only 35 years old and it is a red brick building, and I'm a huge fan of red brick buildings, so we'll miss it if it goes. But if it does go, whatever goes in its place, given that that probably will replace what I consider a gateway building, I would like it to look as nice as possible, and therefore I'd like there to be as strong as possible condition for them to come back to us with regards to materials. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Roy. I'm just looking at going through the conditions now.
Conditions 3 and 4, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I went from the wrong end. Full details of the materials, colour and texture of the external finish of the building should be submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority, and it gives the reason, etc. So, are you saying I think it's covered in conditions 3 and 4? Personally, I'm not minded to say it's got to come back to this committee, but I'm open to. I'm not. What should we say? Dogmatic on that. I'm open to.
No, through you, Chair. I wasn't suggesting that it comes up to the committee.
Oh, right.
I was suggesting that Mr. Lomax and his officers decide. That's all. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we've got condition 3. Have you got Barry? I would have thought it's covered in conditions 3 and 4, wouldn't it?
Yeah, 3 and 4, and Councillor Aurora's indication of the importance of the building, that will help us in discharging those conditions. So we will put that in board.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Okay. Right, thank you. In that case, we're going to go to the vote, and we've got, I think in the end, we've got signage strategy, the use class B8 thing, and the management plan. I haven't gone through the full wording, but those 3 things in particular added in, if you like. So over to you, Sam, for a roll call on the vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. Please can you now indicate how you wish to vote by saying for, against or abstain, and please can you also confirm that you've been present for the duration of the meeting. Councillor Archer. Councillor Archer?
You
may be on mute, Councillor Archer. If you press star and then 6. Okay, I'll move on to Councillor Aurora.
Thank you, Chair. I vote against this application, and I confirm that I've been here throughout the meeting.
Councillor Bailey.
I vote for, and I've been here throughout the meeting.
Councillor Bainham.
I've been here throughout the meeting, and I vote for.
Councillor Cunningham.
I've been here for the meeting, and I vote for.
Councillor Dunstone.
I vote for, and I've been here for the duration of the meeting.
Councillor Edwards.
I've been here throughout, and I'm in favour.
Councillor Heap. I think you're muted, Councillor Heap. Councillor Heap.
By the way, as well.
I think we've got Steph back, but
yeah, I'm back. Hello.
All right. No.
So, I'll go to Councillor Archer then. Councillor Archer.
Yeah, so I've been present throughout the whole meeting, but obviously something happened to my sound just then on my phone. But now I've managed to get back on the Google Meet. So I vote for, and I've been present. Thank you.
Councillor Heat.
I vote for, and I've been here throughout the meeting.
Councillor Mole.
I've been present and I vote for.
Councillor Ryder-Mills.
I've been present throughout the meeting and I vote for.
And Councillor Self.
I've been present throughout and I vote for.
So, Chair, to confirm, that's 10 in favour and 1 against.
Okay, thank you very much. So that's passed, and that and I can confirm now that there's no urgent items. So that concludes the meeting, and I close the meeting at 10:23. Thank you, everybody, for attending, and thank you, everybody, watching on the YouTube channel. Thank you, and good night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.